Welcome to The Pictures Get Smaller. My name is Adam O'Connick and I'm the producer of this show. The things you'll hear over the next 55 minutes or so represent the views of The Pictures Get Smaller and the people making them. All opinions and quotations in no way represent River West Radio and are the sole responsibility of the producer, guests, and callers. River West Radio is not liable for any legal issues arising from the content of this program. So, good evening and welcome to The Pictures Get Smaller. I'm Adam O'Connick and I'm joined by regular contributors Molly McCourt, Katie Morrissey, and Carter Moulton. Tonight we're tackling the issue of spectatorship in the 21st century. In particular, we'll be considering how new and emerging technologies affect the experience of audiences in relation to audio and visual mediums. When preparing for tonight's conversation, I kept coming back to two thoughts. First, The Pictures Get Smaller is, yes, a radio show, quote unquote, on a station that doesn't have a radio signal. We broadcast live online and each episode is archived as a digital file. As such, our audience listens through their computer, mobile phone, or other media device rather than an actual radio. And I'm sure that a sizable percentage of those 20 million listeners or so, that's an estimate based on numbers that I made up, listen after the live event of a given episode has long passed. Okay, so perhaps that's a bit obvious, but my second thought in relation to this week's topic is considering the presidential debate, or the presidential election last night, and the contrasting coverage offered by traditional networks, cable news, online sources, and yes, Twitter, among others. Each seemed to offer a different and unique way of experiencing the results of the election, not to mention the ways in which each campaign was covered by and exploited these various sites of information throughout the months preceding the election. So, perhaps we can begin tonight with some reflections on either our show and River West Radio as being radio that is not radio, and how that might affect our spectators, our listeners, as well as our experiences as spectators of the spectacle that is the American electoral process last night. So, Katie, Carter, Molly, any thoughts, any initial reactions here?
Well, how did you guys spend the evening spectating? I know for myself, I clicked on a link from my buddy's Twitter, and it was New York Times. And the New York Times had an amazingly efficient, clean, streamlined, big board sort of thing where they showed what they projected would happen as far as Romney wins this state easily, Obama wins this state easily, with live up-to-date poll results that were updated every 30 seconds. And then they also had other tabs such as network calls, so where they would actually have a grid with NBC, ABC, CNN, AP, Fox News, just every network, and they would show what network is called what state. And then they would also have, this is amazing, I have no idea the math behind this, but scenarios. So you would actually, it was like a sort of a choose your own adventure sort of thing, where you would show, who you project to win this state, and then if that was the case, Obama would have this many options to win, and Romney would have this many options. It was really, really awesome.
It's a fascinating thing.
And so I was on that part of it for probably half hour, just looking at all these different scenarios.
If Romney wins Florida, turn to page 46.
Yeah, totally.
Were you also watching TV at the same time?
No, I have no cable. I have no TV. So, but YouTube filled the gap there, and they were live streaming, like the president's speech and some coverage, and as well as other networks were doing the same thing. And also, I actually deleted my Twitter last night because of the election. Everyone was giving their 2 cents, and I just had enough, and I was like, I need to move on with my life. So it was a big decision in my life. So
do you anticipate returning to Twitter at some point?
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you?
Who knows? I will. Let's face it, I probably will. But
a temporary hiatus can always be helpful.
Yeah. But that's how I spent my evening. So there was a lot less spectating and a lot more, using these interactive tools and sort of choosing what I thought might happen and looking at it that way, rather than just listening to analysts, give their 2 cents.
Yeah. So it enabled you to to explore the stats and the updated information yourself, rather than it being dictated or explained to you. the way
Well, I mean,
pundits
it's still
do.
being dictated and explained to you. It's still a form of spectatorship. It's just a different. There's a sense of interaction there. I
Sure.
think that's different. Yeah.
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 What about the rest of you, Molly and Katie? Did either of you feel a sense of interaction? Did you experience some unique form of spectatorship with the election and the results coming in last night?
I actually anticipated feeling kind of antsy the whole night. So, like if and I have a TV and I have cable, so I turned it on and I like was so old-fashioned and domestic and like went into the kitchen and like decided this was when I was going to make butternut squash soup and homemade pumpkin pie because I have these gourds that have just been sitting. And I was like, this will take up a lot of time and I will be able to like listen in the background. So that's kind of how I did it. So I was hearing it come in, but at the same time I was active in another way. So that was just like good. And then I also had I had like secondhand Twitter and secondhand Facebook coming in via my husband, who was like just shouting out funny like tweets like from Seth
Sure.
Meyers and that kind of thing. So I didn't go as far as canceling Twitter. I just didn't look at it. But I do have a friend who took a 2-month hiatus from Facebook because she was tired of all that jazz with the campaigns and everything. So that was interesting to me when Carter, you said that. Made me think of it.
Yeah. It certainly is, I don't know, disconcerting when you see your Facebook feed or Twitter feed or whatever and get all of these hostile viewpoints, right?
Yeah,
You're like,
it's fun if it's exciting, but then it's like, I don't know.
After it's over.
Yeah. Katie, were you?
I engaged.
I know you
in
and your partner Nick. Like Nick was very adamant about
Twittering.
multi.
We're very
platform,
We're very
you know,
multi-platform in our
engagement.
household. Well, like Carter, we don't have cable either, and typically I get very weird about the election in the sense that I don't want to. I get very annoyed with the kind of television version of the election, which is mostly about trying to make me feel anxious and make me watch more television.
Sure.
And it helps that I don't have cable so I don't really have to deal with that most of the time. So I tend to tune it out, and I don't really remember ever going to an election night viewing party before, which I know is like a tried and true kind of ritual.
Yeah.
But this time we did go to an election night viewing party. And so for the first time in my life, I experienced CNN on election night. I don't know that I've done that before. I also experienced the Jon Stewart Daily Show version of the election, which I don't think I've done before. And we did this with some friends, and all of us were sitting around. We didn't bring our computers with us, but our two friends who were hosting us had their computers out with multiple tabs open, tracking multiple websites. And I was on my phone on like 3 different, accounts, Facebook, Twitter, all these different things. So there was lots of different modes of engagement there. Yeah. My favorite part of the election, though, is after the election. My favorite part is the next 3 days where, we have all the debriefings and all the analysis. This is the moment I live for. Like, I don't care about the night before. I want to wake up the next morning and start processing.
When you have real stats, not projected
Yes.
stats.
I was online today for about 4 hours just listening to, debriefings and reading things.
Excellent.
I think something I also wanted to say is that the New York Times website that I was looking at crashed. Like it, I had to reload
Apparently,
it.
ABC had issues too.
Yeah,
with their
so
broadcast.
you have to it's almost like voting for American Idol. Or not that I did that ever, but so like American Idol, you call, it's busy, you hang up, you try again. Except this time you're just clicking the refresh button. You know?
Right.
So it was a really strange return to that, like trying to get through that you usually don't have. But yeah, I don't know.
But I think it's interesting, though, that, for the most part, maybe, I don't know if Molly was doing this, but, we were all checking multiple sources at the same time. We weren't just checking one channel, we were flipping around. We heard, and then we used Twitter. We were using Twitter, and we found out that Karl Rove was freaking out on Fox News, so we immediately had to switch to Fox News to see what was happening there, and then we would switch back. We were kind of
social media directs you to
cross-comparing.
different networks. in
Yeah.
some
Right,
ways.
yeah.
And then,
Same.
we had NPR has a very similar setup to New York Times. We had that open on one computer, and we had New York Times open on the other computer. It
Yeah.
was all who will do what first, what's happening where, and using social media to kind of navigate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, that's seemed like fallout still from 12 years ago in that election when there was the race to call it,
Yes.
which proved false, and now
Yes.
there's still the race to have updated information and yet retain some semblance of, I don't know,
And there's
caution.
a sense of distrust too. You
Yeah.
can't trust any one source, and
Yeah.
you kind of know that, and you need to kind of jump around.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it was-
stuck
go
to PBS NewsHour.
We did that too.
It's the one, television coverage that doesn't want to give me a seizure from watching it. I mean, if not for the names of the candidates and the aspect ratio of the television, it looks like it could have been shot in the 70s or
Yes.
something. I'm very pleased with that.
They're very low budget title sequence, yes, and graphics.
I was at the same time, yes, like browsing through websites, like sort of sheepishly, I'll admit, to looking at the Huffington Post and a bit of the New York Times, even Yahoo, just to kind of check where each one was at different points, because some were apparently citing different stats. So like you would have different sites with a different electoral tally at any given moment, which was sort of fascinating. And on PBS, they were resistant to calling it until I think they said their policy was 3 networks
Yeah.
had to call it before they would say, like, this is who won the election or won a state or this or that. So there's this weird referentiality between the networks and between cable stations that they called it. Now we're calling, or vice versa. Or these 3 have called it. We will now acknowledge that they called it and call it ourselves.
But they've had so many problems recently with kind of reacting too early. I mean, look at what happened with the Supreme Court decision on healthcare too, where
Right.
everyone called it too early and they were wrong about the verdict.
Yes.
So it's interesting to see that kind of pressure to be first backfiring on them.
Yeah, and I was even listening like during the day yesterday about how on NPR people were saying the networks are like promising, quote unquote, I'm doing scare quotes, promising to be careful and cautious. And then like I don't remember like in what order it came, but CNN was late on calling it last night, and that was actually one of like the snarky tweets from Seth Meyers was like, too bad CNN is like a time zone behind or something. And in my head I was just like, oh, but they're actually holding to their word, right? I mean, maybe. So it was in my mind I was like, they're the ones that aren't running to be first at the gate, but I don't know.
I didn't hear anything, but CNN refrained from breaking out the hologram technology for this election
I
coverage.
was very disappointed. I've heard so much about the holograms, and I've never experienced them. And I must admit, I was deeply saddened to not experience the holograms until I turned into Daily Show and they had a hologram riff going on. But it was not the same. It was not the same. But I just thinking, like, in terms of spectatorship, I mean,
Yeah.
it just seems like all of this is multi-platform. It's kind of simultaneous and very, like, modular. Like, we're getting bits from here and there, and we're kind of putting together a story on our
Yeah.
own. Yeah.
Yeah, something of a mosaic of
Yeah.
information to some degree.
And there's a sense of customization there. Whether it's genuine or not, I don't know. But there's a sense that you are individually tailoring your
Yeah,
experience.
yeah. In a variety of ways, the way you want to just receive information through broadcasts, through websites, whatever, and the the tone, the sort of reading of that information also is, again, it's obvious, but if you watch Fox News, you're coming from a conservative perspective, most likely, because you're hearing this like slant. Even if they were also very upfront about calling things and not really wavering, with the exception of the Karl Rove appearance. But yeah, so it creates a sense of the election as entertainment to some degree, right? So maybe that's a way for us to kind of seg into what was the impetus for this talk, what Carter had initially suggested about, how new forms of media are changing our experience as spectators in the 21st century. And so we do have this maybe a couple simultaneous things that are happening and things that we can talk about over the course of the remainder of our conversation. That issue of simultaneity, like getting things from different places at the same time. We've seen that distribution model in place for some films, like a filmmaker like Steven Soderbergh experimented with releasing something theatrically on DVD and I think even on HBO Demand at the same time, like his film Bubble, I want to say, was like done that way a few years ago. We also get this emphasis on speed, right, on being first to something, and so getting access to material, even if it's unfinished, is something perhaps new-ish in the last 10 to 15 years with, say, the music industry and downloading things and hearing fragments of tracks, incomplete tracks, the same with films, incomplete, drafts, so to speak, of a film before they're theatrically released. So there's lots of different ways we can go with this. Carter, it looks like you've got...
Yeah, I mean,
focus us.
one direction that I'm interested, we don't have to take in this direction, but is thinking about how the industry is sort of responding to this simultaneity. And one thing we talked about over email is just thinking about how there is sort of, because with things like Netflix and Hulu and this ability to sort of, and even like cable companies have on demand and things like that. There's sort of this ability to stop, pause, go through and collect what you want to watch, put it in a queue.
Sure.
That there's this sort of everydayness to movie watching that is sort of emerging, and sort of like you just put it on in the background while you're doing something else. And
So it's like a fragmented viewing too.
Yeah,
that
totally.
You watch a bit here, return to it later.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and like also thinking about simultaneity, I don't know if they went through with it, but I think the film Tower Heist. If you guys know the Ben Stiller,
Yeah.
and, like, they were toying with the idea of releasing the movie in theaters the same day they would release it on demand for like $30
yeah.
to see it the same day in theaters. I don't remember if they went through with it, but I know other movies are looking to do similar things.
Sure.
And so you see these movie theaters sort of banding together and thinking about ways that they can sort of retaliate and recapture, get money pretty much. So I've been noticing. I don't have to talk about The Hobbit at all after this, but every single preview I've been watching, which is like over 100 lately, but they all at the end of them have sort of announced November 7th today. Pre-book your. Is it the 7th today?
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Okay, good. Pre-book your tickets for the opening night screening. Okay, so it's almost like there's an
The
advertisement.
ticket sale date is.
Right, the ticket
advertises
sale
heavily.
date is advertised. And you also see this on programs like Entertainment Weekly, and this is happening virally too, where you'll have a trailer for a trailer. So you'll have, with Lincoln, I know they showed like 30 seconds of the 2-minute, 30-second trailer like a week in advance.
Same with the new Iron Man trailer. They
Yeah.
kept having teasers for the trailer, and then they did a live simulcast of the trailer release when it finally came out.
Yeah, and World War Z is one that just happened, I think, yesterday with Brad Pitt and zombies.
Yeah.
Goodness. And so I don't know, I'm interested in the way that it seems like they're the industry might be trying to sort of sustain and elongate this like anticipation and creating the sense of must see it in theaters.
Yeah.
Also, we can see that with like emerging technologies and like 48 frames per second, which The Hobbit is using. But also, I don't know, this came out. They're also using this new sound technology called Dolby Atmos in some theaters, which takes the usual sound system and it adds speakers on the ceiling of the theater, and pretty much triples the amount of speaker coverage. So I don't know. It seems
Some more
like
oral immersion than
Yeah.
previously.
So I think there's a lot of interesting ways that there seems to be this sort of aura almost built up around going to the movies again, and it's sort of this special thing, either through advertisements or these new technologies.
I also think it's about where you get your mass audiences. I mean, the idea of an event creation, like look at last night. So last night was a kind of mass audience moment where everyone tunes
Sure.
in because it's a live event. There's only one time that you can tap into that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
So if you create the opening night as the kind of cultural moment that we all need to engage with, then you're able to get the kind of numbers that you're looking for. If it's just a kind of a smaller scale kind of thing that everyone can kind of tap into as they choose, you'll get a kind of ongoing stream of income but it's much smaller.
Yeah, and that's been a change in the economics of blockbusters
Yeah.
in recent years, right? That the push for the opening weekend to the, touchment of all else, like rather than this extended theatrical stay, right? I mean, movies still stay in the theaters a long time, but previously there might be word of mouth, like things would build up steam over time, which happens to some degree with maybe smaller films, I would say, like, say, semi-prestige pictures like The Artist or something that got a following, then it got a wider release, but it wasn't planned that way. But any comic book movie has to have a major opening or it's considered failure. Like John Carter was recently considered a major failure because it didn't have a large opening, but it still, I think, eventually recouped expenses at least. But yeah, there's between these last few comments, there's plenty to come around to.
Can I chime
yeah,
in on
Molly,
something?
yeah.
This thought will expire soon because it's like barely related to something Carter said. But I think it's just very interesting to the idea of like the teaser of a trailer or how we are kind of grabbing these supposedly new ways to grab movie audiences, or just like maybe repackaged. But recently I had found the trailer for The Grapes of Wrath on, and this was for a class I was teaching on road films. I found the trailer just to show them like a snippet of the film, get an idea of it, and I accidentally clicked on one that was the exact same time, and it was like 2 minutes 23 seconds. So I was like, oh, this is the same one. It ended up being a trailer that about 3/4 of it revolved around the success of the Steinbeck novel, and it was showing like. It had this, the old-fashioned voice of like Dateline, Steinbeck signs it, like sells 1 million copies, whatever, and it sparked it went from the book to say like, and Paramount is signing the rights over to actually produce, and it was just nuts. And me too. My students were just like, did I just watch a trailer for a book essentially? And
Book trailers are a
Yeah.
big new marketing push for
Yeah.
books.
Yeah, and this is something and I was just about to say, like, but they are, like,
Yeah.
I came in the next class and I was like, oh no, these are a thing.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was really striking, because it's another media that you don't expect to have
True, yeah.
a trailer.
The Milwaukee buses used to have televisions on them. I mean, they might still, but they actually used to run advertisements a few years ago, and I remember regularly seeing advertisements, particularly for like romance novels, on the Milwaukee
they're
buses.
very popular with romance novels to do the book trailer.
Yeah, it's very, I don't know. It seemed to be working. I guess they seem to be very captivating advertisements. I wanted to read the books after seeing them. Yeah, there are a few things that I want to come back to. So we do have this issue of trailers, like what Molly just brought up, and how the teaser trailer is oftentimes well in advance of the film, before shooting's even begun at times. I think in The Dark Knight Returns, I seem to recall, not The Dark Knight, right?
Rises.
Just The Dark Knight, the second
yeah.
Christopher
Okay.
Nolan film. I remember seeing this teaser trailer. There was just like the bat symbol and some voices, and
It was Inception. Inception did that too. So
Yeah.
wonder if it's
I
a
think the
Nolan
Star
thing.
Trek film did that too.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's not like a new phenomenon, but it certainly does extend the life of this film and the marketing campaign, as Carter was pointing out.
And they also use, you'll with a lot of the films we've been talking about, a big part of the marketing is if you go, you'll also see the new trailer for X movie. So,
Yeah.
you go to see, I'm trying to think of an example. I remember with some of the older Spider-Man movies, it was a big deal because I think a Batman trailer might be attached to it or
Yeah,
something like
and I
that.
think when Star Wars Episode 1 was released, there were people who came just for the teaser trailer.
Yeah.
Because it played before a certain film, which I forgot. I don't even know what it is. Like back in, 98 or something?
I
yeah.
saw Secondhand Lions just to see the Return of the King trailer. And I have no idea why it would be attached to Secondhand
That is
Lions,
weird.
because, I mean, it was the same studio.
Sure.
Yeah.
But come on, I don't see the connection there with like Haley Joel Osment like going through puberty. I don't know.
Kids and families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I stayed for the whole movie, and it was enjoyable, I guess, in its own different way.
But your experience as a spectator peaked from the first 10 minutes of being in that theater.
Yeah, totally.
But that's
That's-
another
yeah.
example of needing to be first too, right? You want to be with your friends and you want to see the trailer first, so
Right.
that you can go back online and report about it to everyone else and talk about it and get lots of hits
Yeah,
because you've seen it first and you can report back to the people who didn't see it.
true. That issue of reportage is very important nowadays in the social media world. And that's one reason why I have this ambivalent relationship, I guess, to opening days of films that I'm really excited about, because I want to see it so I can experience all the secondary like media about it, all the reviews, all of the blog article, whatever. Like, I want to be able to access that without having things spoiled for me.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm either in like media isolation until I've seen a film, and then once I've seen it, then I can sort of saturate myself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's like I feel pressure to go and still see things on opening nights because I don't want to have to shield myself from something like Tumblr or
Right.
like
Yeah.
social media that might have spoilers.
Even just glancing at a screen, you can see a phrase that will like,
Yeah,
not
and I-
ruin the experience, because spoilers, it depends on your spoilers may not be important to you or not, but you're still like losing some element of surprise.
Yeah.
I think it's really, really easy to stumble across spoilers. I with Twin Peaks, for myself,
Yeah.
I won't give the spoiler away here, but I just typed something into Google, and the first thing that came up just completely ruined it for me.
The whole series, or just the
The-
major plot development? Or?
What David Lynch would call the crux of the show.
Yeah, okay.
So, Yeah, I mean, I think that's
Who
sort
killed
of,
Laura Palmer?
Yeah, I'm assuming.
yeah, yeah.
That's not
no, yeah,
spoiling anything for
that's-
anyone who hasn't seen it.
That's the whole show is based around that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I think there's that, and then there's also, I think with the opening night, there's more than just the immediacy and the must see now. It's also I don't know. I think it really rewards a certain sense, it has fandom. People dress up like Captain
Sure.
Jack Sparrow. People point wands at you during Harry Potter. I was sitting next to or behind this like 40-year-old man with a wand who was just pointing it at trailers and was like obliviate and stuff like that. So you get these really awesome stories to tell that extend beyond just the film itself. There's something about that experience. Waiting in line for the Harry Potter film, there's a person dressed as
Yeah.
Voldemort running around like cursing people and putting spells on people. So there's a very unique thing about that as well that
Yeah.
they're trying to play into, I think.
That's very true, and that's kind of like my experience last night. I watched the election coverage at home and on my computer and the TV. But then, a little after 11, I went up to the Comet to see some friends and watch the remainder of the election coverage, which consisted of concession speeches, acceptance speeches, etc. And it was a very festive atmosphere for one thing. Like people were very celebratory. They were giving away like doubles for the price of singles. Like all sorts of things were happening. And then after Obama's acceptance speech, Dr. Nick, the bartender and sort of local celebrity to some degree, immediately played from Team America, the America song, which full title I can't really say right now, but I'm sure you're familiar with that. And the whole bar went wild, and then somehow that segged into the Cure's love song, which also seemed appropriate at the time. But it certainly made the experience memorable in ways that it wouldn't have been if I just stuck to sitting in my apartment and watching coverage solo.
I find this really interesting, though, because, one of the things people talk about today, they talk about there being this loss, and they have this nostalgia for that time where we sat at home and we waited for an episode, and that, we were talking about this a few weeks ago, that kind of importance of watching television and having to wait a week, and
Yeah.
the need for a kind of delay, and that people talk about this sometimes as if we've lost that. But everything we're talking about here, to me, says no, we haven't. We're still waiting for the opening night, and then anticipating. If anything, it's almost been kind of enhanced in some way, or it's just a kind of different version of it, rather than going from week to week and it being a steady build. You just have these kind of epic releases,
Yeah.
and there's one a month or something like that.
And even leaks from sets, things that, circulate online only enhance enthusiasm for certain people, right? They see those things and don't think, oh, now I don't have to see it. Now let's see, I want to see how this is incorporated into the film or something, right? Or I want to see the film with the completed effects when strings have been digitally removed from whatever the stunts. Yeah, Molly, you're looking like.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask. There's so many cute dogs walk by.
So
Anyway, I was just going to ask, when we're talking about this like excitement in the build-up, and I'm not necessarily saying that this is particularly how I feel. I'm just wondering if sometimes, if that's almost an intimidating thing, like so much build-up, like such an event, like we have to go to the midnight showing.
You have to be an informed
You have to
spectator.
be informed, or even like if you are incredibly informed and really excited, but might not want to share it with like so many people you don't, like that, I don't know, that aren't like as close, or I don't know.
Sure.
And I'm just imagining like this fake movie in my head where like this huge, like really excited fan goes and like sneaks into like the matinee, and is by him or herself and just watching it, and like if that would be, I don't know, if that's like the bad part about maybe a little too much exposure. But I don't know. I just wanted to like kind of throw that out there because
That gets into almost Katie's comment earlier on about individualized media experiences, right? And that's like our current spectatorship experience, is that we can individualize things, seek out the types of information, the types of viewing experience that we want. But if it's something that has publicly displayed, then we have to be strategic about how we go about it. Do we want
Right.
the communal opening night dress up experience, or do we want to, as you were saying, sneak in mid-afternoon with, a few retirees and and whatever else?
I think
some good movies that way. But.
I think it also reflects a shift in kind of audience dynamics and what's considered, kind of normal, or cool, or the way to engage. I mean, it used to be that, to be the geek dressing up in line and to know all that about, Star Trek or Star Wars or whatever was kind of marked to as being odd, and it was a little too extreme and it was a little uncomfortable. And today I think it's shifted in a different direction. I mean, now that's seen as no, we like that. I mean, that means you're helping to market our products. That means that you are engaged and interested, and we want to continue to give you more information so that you will continue to help push this and spread the word and continue to buy our things. And that's the more cynical version of it, of course. But there's also
Sure, there's a commercial element to why things are tailored to like fan groups and whatever else. Yeah.
And then on the other end, I think there's more kind of acceptance of people who want to engage with the product. This is me going to the less cynical version of it, and kind of create fan work about it, and keep sustaining the product over years and years, and kind of engaging in the story. And again, that's seen as being less kind of culturally alarming, I think, now than it used to be.
Yeah, certainly. Oh.
No, I just like that's a flip side. Like it's almost this person who needs to be alone with their favorite thing or favorite movie is now kind of like they're the different person. Like it's like, ooh, why doesn't that guy want to come with us? Or
Yeah.
it's just interesting.
Why didn't that person want to write a blog post about the experience they just had?
Right.
That's maybe a rough way of returning to something that was brought up earlier that I was sort of interested in that sense of fragmented viewing, and how this can, all these technological developments can help us be really saturated viewers and spectators that we know so much going in. Then also that sense of fragmentation that an individual text, like a film, a television series, or an episode, can be watched partially and then returned to with much more ease than previously, right? Depending on what technologies you have, it could just be a basic DVD device in your home, or something where you can stream things between your computer, your television, your phone even, and bring the viewing experience with you. And it seemed like this disrupted viewing is almost an updated version of spectatorship from early in the 20th century, when people would come and go into films just at varying points, regardless of the actual start time of the film. People have talked about how, say, Psycho is a key film in making people get to movies on time when they begin, and staying for the duration of them rather than just entering and leaving at will. And now we kind of see that, I'll just watch part of it now and I can catch up with the other part later, or I can defer this viewing in favor of watching something else. I remember about a month ago, yes, there was a baseball playoff game that I wanted to watch at the same time as the vice presidential debate. And I chose the liveness of the baseball game over the liveness of the presidential debate. But then I watched the president or the vice presidential debate around midnight on my computer afterwards, and that option was nice, but it certainly is something unique to this period, right?
Well, the thing I find interesting about that, though, is something is different. I mean, but we feel that, but at the same time, it's not like there isn't continuity between this and before. Like you said, there's an older version of movie going that echoes this, but also if we think about television, I mean, television has always been about delayed viewing, about waiting till after the commercial break, about walking away and coming back.
And that the televisual flow is endless.
Yes.
We drop in and out.
Yeah. So, I mean, but there's a sense, too, before we didn't have necessarily a means to record or as easily record and kind of store the television viewing for later. So I think, obviously, there is a shift there, but I don't think it's a complete rupture compared to what came before. That's about all I want to say. Sorry.
I think it's your point about choosing between two live events, which liveness do you value more?
Sure.
I think is a very interesting way of putting it. And I think a lot of the times, given the choice between, it's not live, but the act of watching a movie, knowing that we can always go back, sort of go through the scrubber bar and reorient ourselves that way. It sort of changes. I don't know. I don't want to say that film isn't chosen as much or anything, but I think that's something that we're starting to think of movies as something we can sort of put away, right, and come back to, and taking that for granted. But I
except for those experiences that we've been talking about of that the opening night, that is a unique live experience.
Theater,
won't be reproduced.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's this idea of going going out of the home, because movies are so easily accessible in the home now.
Yeah.
That actual physical movement to a theater, like you said early, if you could do that in the early 20th century, go in and go out. Now it's the opposite. We stay at home and we can just sort of call upon anything we want in a sense.
Yeah.
The viewing conditions have changed too. I mean, we've got wider screen TVs now, we've got HD, all those snazzy things. So I think there's
Depending on your ethical persuasion, access to anything at any given point.
yeah, and so I think too
Pirates.
that there's that sense of you're not necessarily there's a feeling that the experience isn't as diminished watching it at home too,
Yeah.
which I think makes a difference.
Yeah, especially with the advent of 3D televisions,
Yeah.
Yeah.
sort of replicating that what
So-
was a unique theatrical experience now can be reproduced at home to some degree.
I think the other thing too that's important is movies are increasingly expensive. So if you're going to go and pay for it, you want it to be an event. You want it to be something that's worth the like $14 a ticket
Yeah.
that you're going to pay, and the $7 for popcorn. All that stuff.
What do we make of things that are designed explicitly to, well, I guess in theory enhance the experience of moviegoing and also to bump up the ticket price, right? Something like 3D technology, IMAX technology. I don't know is there a cost component to something like Dolby Atmos or the 48
Probably.
FPS that you'd mentioned?
I am sure there is, but there's no, because it's actually The Hobbit is the first film to experiment with the stuff. I don't know.
It
hasn't
sounds
really
like they're
been-
going to really minimize how much they experiment with it too, which can
Yeah.
be very selective.
I know that it actually came out like yesterday, the list of theaters that are capable of showing this 48 frames per second, and I think it's like with the U.S. and Canada, it's 450.
Yeah.
I think there aren't any in Wisconsin, and there's only
I'm sure there's one in Chicago at least.
yeah, I'm sure there are. But I don't know about Atmos. I think Atmos is even smaller, a smaller number.
Yeah. Could you explain 48 FPS for us too? By the way?
So
If you- as a
48 frames per
thumbnail?
second. Movies are usually shown at 24 frames per second. And Peter Jackson and James Cameron have been big pushers of this new technology. James Cameron even wants to bump it up to 60 frames per second.
He's a pusher of all sorts of technologies. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, just try
Titanic
this.
too.
Just try this and we'll.
But
bring
so
it to
what
nature.
is the perceived advantage to going to 48?
Well, as Peter Jackson puts it, 3D, makes it so the back wall of the theater is a window, and 48 frames per second removes that window.
But what does that mean?
That does not mean anything to me. But, the point, I know from a production standpoint, a lot more detail is picked up. So, for instance,
Yeah.
the production department had to switch from using fake prop materials like plastic and things like that. The camera would pick those up as obviously artificial. So they would actually have to make,
Better
metal
objects.
and ceramic textures. But at the same time, I know from watching some of the production blogs that the cameras they use, the 3D 48 frames per second, I think they're Red Epic cameras, really distort color. So what they would have to do is really, for instance, the characters' faces, for the dwarves, they had to really, really redden up the faces or else they would appear yellow on the camera. So there's a strange, there's sort of, in one way, this technology makes production more authentic in the sense of you're getting these, non-plastic props, but at the same time, you're also really, really shifting. I mean, you shift color anyway in post, but
Sure.
the way that that's sort of working. So I don't know, but I know that there was a screening of the test footage, 48 frames per second, at CinemaCon a few months ago, and the reaction was very mixed.
Yeah.
The problem is that audiences said they could see, for instance, on wigs, they could see the lines where it was pasted on, and just the makeup looked bad, and the sets looked, sort of. A lot of people compared it to HD video, so I don't
Yeah.
really know, and I don't know.
Makes the artificiality transparent because it's
Yeah.
such a realistic image that you're seeing.
And maybe we don't want that. Maybe we
Yeah.
don't want that in a sense. But it's interesting. It's a lot of it's TBD.
One of the things you just brought up reminds me of issues again with earlier in film history with just film stock itself and the relationship of film stock to the objects and individuals on screen. And I remember one of my graduate seminars, we were talking about the Indian film industry and how early on many films many of the productions had issues because there was certain Kodak film stocks were designed for, well, Caucasian people, and it made anyone of any different sort of ancestry or pigmentation look different on screen. Like there was something that affected just the actual visage of the actors. And now we're seeing like a recurrence of that just in a mass way if this sort of technology would pick up, that we need to or these filmmakers need to reconsider all of the actual objects that are going to be in front of the camera because the technology is going to depict them differently than they had been depicted previously. Yeah, Molly.
I just think
sorry.
it's interesting that this is all coming out when we're producing The Hobbit. When this is like a fantasy text, and we're upset that we can see like wigs and like too close to faces. I just think it's kind of funny. That's all.
We're going for realism
right.
with dwarves running around. So
The doors look yellow. Oh no, they look inauthentic. That's all. I just thought it was.
Where's Ray Harryhausen? I just want to see his version of The Hobbit in
I know,
Lord of the Rings.
But I think the poster for Jurassic Park 3D just came out today, and
I did not know that was happening.
I just said Jurassic Park 3D, right?
Yeah.
Okay. For some reason, I thought I said something else. I have no idea. Anyway, it's just a re-release, right? And you're getting this a lot. You're getting
Oh.
Monsters Inc.
I
3D
see.
being re-released.
It's
Finding
not-
Nemo.
I was thinking it was something different. Yeah.
Yeah, Titanic was this year. Titanic
Star Wars
3D.
films, the original
See it
trilogy.
like never before, right?
Yeah.
And the poster is just the Jeep vehicle and the gates of Jurassic Park with the huge letters 3D on it, and it's opening up, right? So 3D is currently, I mean, something that's interesting is that these 3D films, a lot of them have 3D in the title.
Yeah.
So they're marketing 3D as, sort of equal to the narrative of the story, by
Yeah.
putting that in there. And so it's like, go see this 3D technology, which is not, I mean, it is available on 3D TV, but there's even been, there's discrepancies between
Yeah.
what's more actual.
And most people just don't have access to 3D TV, so
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have
Sure.
to go
I
to the
mean, come
movie
on.
theater to see it.
Yeah.
Just that rhetorical gesture is interesting. I mean, it would be a film in 3D, right?
Right.
And now it just film 3D is the title. I mean, it used to be you have to have a franchise that made it to part 3D.
Yeah.
So with Friday the 13th 3D.
Yeah, like Saw 3D, and there's Silent Hill something 3D.
Yeah.
Those aren't remakes, but then you have, so there's some confusion there, like Toy Story 3D
Mm-hmm.
and Toy Story 3. I don't know. It's definitely an interesting move, but I think that's just another step in trying to offer something unique
Yeah.
in the theater.
What's been all of your experiences with 3D technology? I mean, personally, I'm not a huge fan. I've only seen a few things like Avatar, which I just sort of dislike the narrative and acting, but appreciate the visuals, and Prometheus 3D, which looked good at times, but also was, I thought, kind of shoddy in other ways, script-wise. But yeah, have you had positive, negative experiences? Does it make it appealing as a spectator?
I mean,
I would say the most enjoyable 3D movie I've ever seen was Coraline, actually. Which, if we're talking about realism,
Sure.
yeah, there's like puppets and clay. So, but yeah, I think it's interesting how, I don't know if I've been trying to think about how this compares to like early cinema and cinema of attractions, and the way that spectators are sort of invited into the theater to see technology,
Yeah.
and to marvel at,
adorn themselves with technology,
yeah,
too.
totally, and really appreciate the technology. I mean, the film is there, the movie story is there, but why are we going to see the movie in the first place?
Yeah.
And so what you get is a lot of these 3D moments where things are popping out at us, like things are being thrown at us, things are being, like pickaxes are heading into the theater. And actually a lot of the trailers for these films will show the audience. So they'll frame a shot where there's the audience wearing their glasses, the screen, and then something reaches out of the screen and everyone, their popcorn goes flying or whatever. So it's in the marketing of these films, they're actually marketing the experience.
yeah.
Just as much as marketing the film. So I don't know. I think
If not
it's
more, really.
yeah. So and these things of jutting out at us, or pretending we're on a train that's going all over the place. That's sort of the aesthetics that are coming out in these trailers. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really an interesting point. I mean, that now movie going is an experience once again, instead of just a distraction, right?
Yeah.
A destination.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember there was a film that came out this past year, and I remember we had the option to. I was like with my mom, and it was like, this isn't a 3D theater, is that okay? And we both said yes, and it was because, and I wish I could remember it because this would make it so much better, but it was basically like, we both looked at each other and thought, why would that even need to be in 3D? Because we were going,
Yeah.
because we had heard about other things about the movie. So sometimes with me, I mean, I think 3D, I can't really get far beyond like it's neat. I think I saw Lion King in 3D, and it was mostly just to see Lion King again and in a theater
Yeah.
because there's I just like the atmosphere of a theater. It wasn't because I needed to. I might have gotten to see like a happy movie from my childhood, not in 3D in a theater. So and a lot of
Even-
times I just kind of escape it because of expense.
Sure. Yeah, if I have the choice, I often will pick the non 3D, unless I've heard that it's really worth it. Like
Yeah,
I was disappointed when Werner Herzog's Cave of Forgotten Dreams played in Milwaukee, but no theaters had the 3D version.
Yeah.
And when I heard it was one of the best uses of 3D, so I only got to see the 2D. But in general, I've just found it, kind of or I don't know, not very interesting to me. And there's also issues too with films in which the 3D is added in post production, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
it darkens
conversion.
the image. Yeah. And I don't know if any of you have noticed this with, say, The Lion King. Did the film seem darker or dimmer in some ways than you remembered because of the 3D?
Well, the other thing that's happening too is the movie theaters aren't switching out is it the lenses or the thing
Oh
that's-
yeah, that's
so
right.
you
yeah.
have a problem where they're leaving. I'm probably getting the technology part wrong, but they're leaving the 3D lenses or the 3D projectors in the theater instead of swapping them out. So you're
Yeah.
watching non 3D films on the 3D projectors, and it's very much altering the film. And that's happened to me several times. You can tell once you know
Yeah.
that what they're doing. You can clearly tell the film is darker. It's much murkier. It's much. You squint at it. It's not as pleasing to look
Yeah.
at.
Yeah, I certainly remember Roger Ebert has been a big critic of that.
Hates it.
Yeah, and I've read much of what he was saying. But yeah, Carter, we're gonna.
Well, I think another thing we haven't talked about yet was if we compare these scenes where I'm thinking of like the Polar Express, and I don't know if you guys seen The Amazing Spider-Man at all.
I did not see that.
Okay,
one.
well, there's
Yeah.
this like 2-minute sequence where it's a first-person view. It's like a video game essentially. We're just flying through skyscrapers, continuous shot, and so there's like this whole, wants to immerse us in this immersion. But then there's also things like, is it Fox Bay Grill? Is that
Right. Yeah.
yeah. So, and Alamo Draft House and these other venues that serve dinner with the movie, or have entertainment with the movie somehow in different ways,
Yeah.
or like an open bar that you just walk up to while the movie's going. So that's like another, in a completely different direction, moving towards cinema is just part of an experience. It's not the entire thing.
Yeah.
It's sort of a distracted viewing is encouraged there, unless you can somehow like cut your steak without looking down. Which I
Right.
can't
Right.
do.
Or sign your bar tab. I was just at Fox Bay for the first time recently during the Milwaukee Film Festival, and it was strange. I couldn't help. I didn't
awkward
order food, but I couldn't help but notice all the other people who would be sort of eating, and then the servers had it timed down, so about 5-10 minutes before the credits would roll, they would swing by with like the tab and give them their credit cards back.
But I think it's a different kind of event creation, right? It's about creating date night or, making it a routine that you go and you do this it's making it more social too.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an event oriented, but it's less epic. It's less like everyone has to go that one night.
Right, and I think what's interesting too is this was like a while ago when we were talking about how if you have enough money, you can have a 3D TV in your house, and you can watch from your couch, which you probably prefer over any other seats that you find in a public theater. You can do all these things, but then when you think about eating dinner in a sort of cafe or restaurant atmosphere, and there's a movie in front of you. Isn't this just kind of the inverse? Like, you're going out to a movie, you're removing yourself from your home to eat food in a comfortable seat in front of a big screen. And so, and I'll admit, like, I've seen it at Marcus theaters, like the Majestic, like they do it well. I've been in the bistro theaters just because it's like, well, it's fun to have a drink or something.
Sure.
But and it's also just like you never see any heads bobbing. Like they set it up really well, but at the same time, you still have a little light on this like kind of table in front of you the whole time, and this for me it just doesn't work as well. And I've heard people talk about like that they don't like sitting at a table with like this kind of like office chair, but there are some that actually have like lazy boys and like recliners, and you can like swivel a table to go over the lazy boy. I don't know where
God.
these are. This was a friend from out of state, but to me that was just like, yeah, I mean it sounds awesome, but at the
Something
same
to hold
time
your
like,
eyeballs open too.
yeah, like I could just do this at home and be in my PJs, so is this still kind of a fun event, or is this just kind of turning into a home theater?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think something that has been the elephant in the room during this conversation is people texting at movies.
Yeah.
And I think it's the Alamo Draft House, but have you heard about the texting ninjas?
Oh, I've heard about this. Yeah.
So they actually have, they employ people. I think it might just be, part of the concession staff or whatever. But they dress up as black ninjas, and their job is to creep around the movie theater and find people who are texting and remove them.
No, that's Elmo Draft House.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm down with that because, like, I don't like when people are texting, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's some sort
Just the
of,
light
like,
from the phone is in a darkened theater, you see another light pop up, and it's
yeah.
diverting your attention. It's disrupting the viewing experience.
Yeah, but knowing that there's ninjas in the theater creeping around is a completely different form of spectatorship.
It's true.
At the same time, though, I think partly it's what we're talking about here reflects different ideas of what ideal or quote unquote good viewing is like. I mean, I don't particularly, enjoy people eating next to me when I'm watching a film, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily, there's nothing. I don't experience the film radically differently whether I'm eating popcorn or eating French fries. I mean,
Sure.
I'm still watching the movie, and so I mean, I think partly this goes back to issues of etiquette and what's perceived as good, kind of high quality behavior and what's perceived as low and
Sure.
inappropriate behavior. So I mean, I think there's some issues going on there too.
And it depends on the film too. For me, if it's sometimes I don't care. Sometimes I want that sort of immersion of like having crazy people around. I remember when
about that during Cult.
yeah when I saw Grindhouse, it was at the Rosebud Theater out in Wauwatosa and Waukesha.
And really, how is this different
Yeah.
than drive-in theater? I mean,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
bring your car full of people and you turn on your radio and you all eat the snacks that you brought with you, and that. I mean, so in a way,
if you're
this
going
isn't-
for the appeal of the technological spectacle, right, of the 3D, of the sound, you don't want those distractions, right? But if you're just going to see a movie you're maybe a little bit indifferent to, then those other amenities are nice, perhaps. Or maybe that's a generalized way of distinguishing, but
I mean, I guess 3D doesn't give you the option really of you have to keep the glasses on.
Yeah. yeah.
But I think again though, there's an idea there over what films warrant quote unquote good attention versus,
Yes.
and I think
Yeah.
that can be problematic.
Yeah.
And I think I'm just sad that the idea of a theater with just a seat and that's it, and a screen is becoming like, when I start talking about how that's what I like and that's what I want to do, I think I feel like I'm pegged for like, oh, she just is sentimental or nostalgic for this like time that's gone by. And in my head, I'm like, no, I really think that these things can coexist. Like, why do
Yeah.
I have to, like the Oriental or the Downer? Like, that's pretty much what they are. And do they have to be these icons of like, yes, this is what a movie house once was?
Right.
I don't think they do. So, but that's just me being defensive.
Yeah. Maybe that's a roundabout way of us getting back to that individualization of spectatorship, that we have different places catering to different types of spectators on top of us being at home and seeking out different things. We go to different places and we have a more, I don't know, food-oriented movie experience, or a more technology-oriented movie experience, or more communal-oriented, or whatever the case might be, more nostalgic experience perhaps. Yeah. That's maybe a bit reassuring, I suppose. Any final thoughts here on spectatorship? I feel like we
have you guys been to any drive-in shows before?
I have
Yes.
not actually.
In your life?
Yes,
Yeah,
I used to go all the time.
Okay, yeah, because I would recommend those in the summer. They're so fun.
Yeah.
But I would also recommend seeing like an action movie, and then, a lot of the times they play two in one night.
Yeah, it's usually-
So, maybe try to have the second one be an action movie you don't really care about, and then drive away. There's nothing more exhilarating than listening to like swords clinking and clanking as you're driving on the highway. It's pretty fun. Oh, that was Pirates of the Caribbean after Cars 2.
All right. Well, maybe with that recommendation, we'll call it an hour here on The Pictures Get Smaller. Thanks for listening, and thanks to everyone for chatting and sharing their thoughts on spectatorship. We'll be back next week, possibly with a topic about political film and television.